There we go.
All righty. Hold on. I think I gotta accept the record and no. No. All right, good. We go back. All right. We ready?
Yes, sir.
Yes,
All right.
sir.
We're gonna talk about grief and the danger of grief. This this lesson is to help us deal with when we're feeling grief and feeling loss. Um Obviously the best place to start to talk about loss is Job. So we're going to read in Job 2, and we're going to talk a little bit about what happens to Job and how Job dealt with grief. And then we're going to go to some script that show us how we need to deal with grief. Okay. So I'm starting at Job 2:1. Again, there was a day when the sons of Elohim came to present themselves before Yahuwah, and Hasatan came also among them to present himself before Yahuwah. Verse 2. And Yahuwah said to Hasatan, from whence comest thou? And Hasatan answered Yahuwah and said, from going to and fro in the earth and from walking up and down in it. Okay. And Yahuwah said unto Hasatan, hast thou considered my servant Job, that there is none like him in the earth, a perfect and upright man, one that feareth Elohim and escheweth evil, and still he hold fast his integrity, although thou movest me against him to destroy him without cause. So this shows right here, verse 3 shows that when we talk about later, we're going to talk about the advice that his friends gave him, and his friends were trying to tell Job that he had transgressed. But this in verse 3 shows that Job did not transgress. Now, Hasatan wanted the Most High to move against him, but there was no cause to move against him. So Hasatan, this is verse 4, answered Yahuwah and said, skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. Okay, so skin for skin. What does that remind you of? Skin for skin. What does that remind you of? When I say skin for skin, think about the law.
Like eye for an eye.
Yeah, right. Eye for eye, tooth for
Mm-hmm.
tooth, right?
Yeah.
It reminds you of that law, right? He's saying skin for skin, yea, all that a man hath will he give for his life. So he's saying, like, if a man has to choose between all he has in his life, will he choose all he has and preserve his life? So that's the question, skin for skin. All right. Verse 5. But put forth thine hand now and touch his bone and his flesh, and he will curse thee to thy face. So that's what the Hasatan is saying. He's saying, if you put your hand against him and take everything that he has now and touch his bone and his flesh, that he's going to curse thee. All right. Verse 6.
Ain't that kind of crazy? Ain't that sometimes what we would say? We
Yeah.
curse I wasn't with us.
Because we don't have anything, right? If you don't have anything, that's what people think. People think because you don't have these great possessions that the Most High is not with you. And that's part of what the church has taught us. The church has taught us that if the Most High is with you, then you have prosperity. That means you have a lot of things. You got jets, you got cars, you got all these
materialistic things.
Absolutely.
And that's necessarily true, right?
No, it's not necessarily true. And actually, it could be a trap. It could be a trap to seek after those things to mean the Most High is blessing you. Because you know what? The Hasatan, to fool you, he will make it so you can get these things. And these things are the very things that will keep you away from the Most High. So remember, Hasatan he deceives you. So he can deceive you with good things or things that you perceive as being good or your desires.
Right.
He can deceive you with your own desires.
Right.
And that's what happens. All right.
So that's what it means by a man being led away by his own lust and enticements.
Absolutely. So those things that you want, he'll give them to you. He'll give them to you.
He gives you what you want, but the Most High gives you what you need.
Exactly. And he'll give those things to you just so you'll stay.
To distract you.
Yes, just so you'll be astray. Just so you'll worry about those things, just so you'll be consumed with those things. You know, when we get into the script, we talk about a rich man, and it says that it's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich man to be saved. And
Right.
that whole little I would call it a proverb. That proverb right there, it's not in Proverbs, it's just a proverb, meaning it's a saying, it's a wise saying. It's a
Right.
wise saying because it means it is extremely hard for someone that already is rich and has money to come back and depend on the Most High. It's very, very difficult. And if you ever tried to thread a needle before, then you know how difficult it is to thread a needle, and you know a camel can't get through that. So he's just trying to show you that the difficulty of a rich man being saved. So that should show you about some of these pastors that are flying jets and things like that, that just because they have all this stuff, that does not mean that they are blessed by the Most High.
They're
So
getting all these things from Hasatan
Mm-hmm.
Crazy.
by being.
I
Oh,
never
what?
went.
What'd you say, Mick?
I said I had never went to church, right? But when I
Mm-hmm.
woke up most high, I thought, oh man, I'm gonna have a better job. I'm gonna have.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I know now. I know he'll give me, and none of those things came. Not right away. It took, nah, doesn't work
Yeah.
like
Yeah, it
that.
doesn't work like that. It
Work
doesn't
like
work like that. Verse 7. So went Hasatan forth from the presence of Yahuwah and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. So he gave Job boils from the top to the bottom. He had boils all over his body. Now just think, you wake up one morning, you have boils all over you. How many of you are praising Yah in that? Just think about it.
Mm,
Think about it.
right. Like, it's like, for most people, the first thing they'll be worried about is like, how do they get the boils and how does it get rid of the boils? Like, what did you do to get these boils and stuff?
And they'd be worried about how other people see them now, right? Don't you think?
Yeah,
Don't you think
exactly.
that
Yeah,
people
yeah, yeah.
imagine having
Like,
boys?
say,
Yeah,
like before you're about to go to work and stuff like that. Yeah, I can't go to work like this. Look at me. I look like I got an
yep,
infection.
yep. All
Yeah.
right, verse 8. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal. So he tried to scrape himself and he sat down among the ashes. He's trying to dry him out. He's trying to get rid of him. Okay. Verse 9. Then said his wife unto him, dost thou still retain thy integrity? Curse Elohim and die. So his wife is now saying, well, how do you maintain your integrity with all these boils on you? Like, you're not, just curse them and die, just so you can die, because you shouldn't have to live like this. All right. So remember, people are going to come to you when you're going through certain things, and people are going to come to you and give you very bad advice. Right? They're going to tell you to act rashly. They're going to tell you to act in ways that is against the Most High, because those ways are ways that satisfy your flesh. Those are things that satisfy how you feel, right? And the Most High isn't always about how you feel, and He's not always about satisfying those feelings and emotions. Okay, sometimes the hardest thing is for us to do is to act contrary to our emotions. All
Right, because
right.
a lot of those things come out of our hearts, and the hearts is the most deceitful among all things.
Exactly. Because your heart
You know?
wants things, right? And those desires don't
Right.
necessarily line up with the word. So since they don't line up with the word, when you succumb or give into those things of your heart that you want, those things are contrary to the Most High a lot of times. So when you do certain things, it may not feel great. It may not make you feel like you're on cloud nine. It may not feel like the best thing, but sometimes when you have to do things and cut things off and do things, you're actually walking in the spirit, because you're not succumbing or giving into those worldly desires. Because those
You're
worldly
walking on that
desires,
righteous path.
right? Those worldly desires will make you feel good every time. They'll make
Right.
you
Temporary.
feel good every time. But
Yeah.
are they good for you? No. But they'll
Right.
make
I
you
have.
feel good.
Go ahead. Go
Go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say when you was talking about, Hasatan giving you certain things, like I've noticed like a lot of times where I would see myself overloaded with work, even though I know that the Most High is the one who provides me with work, right?
Mhm.
And the work is endless and continuous. But a lot of times I would catch myself taking on jobs and taking on like trouble calls and stuff like that, and I will find myself overwhelmed by those things. And I know that when, if it was the Most High giving it to me, I wouldn't be overwhelmed by it. And the people would respect my schedule.
Right, right. All right. So verse 10. But he said unto her, so this is Job talking to his wife, thou speakest as one of the foolish women speaketh. What? Shall we receive good at the hand of Elohim, and shall we not receive evil? In all this did not Job sin with his lips. So Job never spoke a word against the Most High. All right. All these things happen. He got these boils all over his body. His wife is telling him to curse the Most High and die. And he tells her, listen, you're speaking of like one of these foolish women. This script right here reminds me of when Peter, when the Messiah said to Peter that he must die, that he must, that he was going to die. And Peter said, no, no, Lord, not so. And he said, get thee behind me, Hasatan, right? Because he spoke rashly without speaking in the spirit. And that's his wife did the same thing. His wife spoke rashly, right? She spoke rashly and she didn't consider what was happening here. All right. So Job says to her, listen, if we get good at the hand of Elohim, then and we shall we not receive evil also? So in all this, Job didn't sin. So Job was steady. Remember, these things are building. These are building. This is just the first thing in a string of events that are going to happen. And when we get to the point where Job is feeling grief, then we're going to talk about what Job had to do to kind of get through that. Verse 11. Now, when Job's three friends heard all this evil that was come upon him, they came every one from his own place. Eliphaz the Temanite, and Bildad the Shuhite, and Zophar the Naamanite, for they had made an appointment together to come to mourn with him and to comfort him. So, good friends, they came. His friends heard what was going on. They came. They came to mourn with him. They came to try to comfort him. Okay. They came to bring him comfort. And here's the thing you got to realize. Sometimes your friends come in a way where they want to help you and they want to be a help. Right. But they're not always correct about what the move is to move forward. They're not always correct about what you need to do to get through things. Sometimes a lot of times when people when people have what's called empathy. Empathy means when your brother or someone's going through, you feel for them. So you have empathy towards that person. So with that empathy towards that person, you really act emotionally. You act really emotionally. Think about your own kids, right? Think about your kids. Think your kid runs out in the street, right? He almost gets hit. He gets hit by a car, right? Are you going to chastise him in that moment? Or are you going to see if your kid is okay? Or are you going to try to comfort them? Right?
Right.
You're going to try to comfort them. You're not going to chastise them, right? You're not going to chastise. You're
Yeah.
going to comfort them at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So when we look at this, when we look at his friends are coming in a spirit to help and mourn with him. But we're going to see later that, some of this stuff goes a little sideways. Verse 12. And when they lifted their eyes afar off and knew him not, they lifted up their voice and wept. And they rent everyone his mantle and sprinkled dust upon their heads towards the Shamayim. So they saw Job and he was so messed up, they didn't even recognize him. They didn't even recognize their boy. They came up to him, they didn't even recognize him when they saw him. They was like, wow. And it made them weep. That's how bad shape. So you can only imagine what kind of condition Job was in at this point, that even his friends didn't recognize him. He was in such bad shape. Okay. Verse 13. So they sat down with him upon the ground 7 days and 7 nights, and none spake a word unto him, for they saw that his grief was very great. All right, so looking at that, so we're looking at grief now. So now Job is starting to experience his grief. Now he's going through his grief because of his condition. We looked at his friends sat down and stayed with him 7 days and 7 nights. They didn't even speak, they just sat with him to comfort him. So what the thing that you're going to learn about grief is there's a period of time that it normally takes to get through grief and to get over grief. In this case, they sat for 7 days and 7 nights. In the case of when Jacob died, I believe they mourned for Jacob for 40 days, if I'm not mistaken. I could be mistaken on that. But I believe they mourned for Jacob for 40 days. So depending on the depth of the grief, there is a lot of times a mourning period, a period in which it takes you to get over those things. And there's a reason for that, because grief brings about a certain type of, I would say, a certain type of response where a lot of times your body shuts down, right? Your body can't move. You can't go to the next thing. Your body shuts down. Grief will bring you to a point where if you let it, it will bring you to the grave. Okay. So when we look at grief, it can start out small as a small thing, but that thing will suddenly consume you. So what you need to do is with the grief, you have to give it a time limit. If you mourn for something, you have to give it a time limit. You can't mourn for something forever. I know people that they've had family members pass away, right? And they still 20, 30 years later, every weekend are visiting that person's grave. See, they haven't let go of that grief. They haven't let go of that mourning. They haven't let go of that loss. They didn't give themselves a time to get rid of it and then move on. They are still every week experiencing that same loss that they had for that person. Okay. And that becomes dangerous. When you get to that point where you are mourning something constantly and you can't let it go, it becomes dangerous. That's what leads you to the grave, because you get to the point where you feel as though you can't live without that thing. And that thing has to be back in your life or you can't go on. So that's why grief becomes dangerous, because grief will put you in the grave with that thing that you lost. It'll put you right beside that thing. So you got to be careful when you experience grief. You have to put limits on that grief. You have to put limits on how long you're going to grieve something. And if you don't, that can get out of control and it can consume you. Anybody got any questions on that?
Say that last part again.
If you don't put a time limit on how long you grieve something, that grief can come to consume you, mean take you all over, take your body over, where you'll want to be in the grave with that thing that you lost, where you don't think you
Yeah,
can go on without that thing.
That's sort of like suicide.
right. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like it's despair. It'll
Yep.
go from like sadness to depression to despair to the point where you just want to end it all.
Yeah.
Right. So that is almost similar to like how nowadays you would have people that mourn death, right?
Mhm.
And a lot of people that mourn death of, mothers, fathers, stuff like that, sisters, brothers, and they watch these people get sick, or they watch the people go through the stages all the way unto death. They would feel as if, there was something that they can do.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
when they get to that point of there was nothing that they could do, then they would go into this grieving process of saying that they didn't do enough.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and a lot of people, you know, that I've come across would resort to drinking more.
Oh yeah.
To drown out the grief that they're going through because they feel as if they could have did more. You know,
They feel guilty.
right. They
Some,
resort to
yeah,
drugs and all kind of stuff. So that almost kind of
right.
like backs up what the Hamashiach says about a spirit leaving from a man and going out and getting 7 more worse than himself. So grief is like a gateway that opens up a whole, you know, plethora of different spirits.
Mm-hmm. All right, I'm gonna
And,
jump to Genesis 50 before we move on. We're gonna jump to Genesis 50. All right, take a look here. All right, so this is Jacob or Israel. This is when Israel died. Genesis 50 verse 1. And Joseph fell upon his father's face and wept upon him and kissed him. And Joseph commanded his servants, the physicians, to embalm his father, and the physicians embalmed Israel. Boy, that's I can use that later. Israel was embalmed. All right. Verse 3. And 40 days were fulfilled for him. All right, so 40 days of mourning, for so are fulfilled the days of those which are embalmed. And the Egyptians mourned for him 70 days.
Mm-hmm.
So the Egyptians mourned for him 70 would be 60, 70 days. They mourned for him in total. Okay. And so the embalming was 40 days, but then they mourned for him 70 days. And when the days of his mourning were past, that's an important statement there. It was time to move on.
Mm-hmm.
The days of his mourning were past, meaning the mourning was over. It was time to bury him and move on. Okay. So they put a limit, they put an end to their period of mourning. Because remember how grievous the 12 sons must have felt when Jacob passed, when he died. Just think how grievous, because they loved him. But think how grievous that was for them. But they knew that after those 70 days, the mourning was over and they had to move on. Joseph spake unto the house of Pharaoh, saying, if now I have found grace in your eyes, speak, I pray you, in the ears of Pharaoh, saying, verse 5, my father made me swear, saying, lo, I die in my grave, which I have digged for me in the land of Canaan. There shalt thou bury me. Now, therefore, let me go up, I pray thee, and bury my father, and I will come again. Okay. And Pharaoh said, go up and bury thy father according as he made thee swear. All right. So they went and buried Jacob after those 70 days. All right. Because the mourning had to end. It had to be over because, they had to get on. They had to get on with their lives. Right. So that mourning had to end at that point. So that's just an example of a mourning period, but an end to the mourning period. And like I said, depending on what it is, the mourning period could be long or short, or the mourning period could start, you not think about it for a while, and then start up again. It happens in a lot of different ways. But when you are feeling grief and you're starting to grieve something, you need to really put a time limit on how long you're going to grieve that thing. And once you are done with it, you need to step up, move on, and go to the next thing. Because once that thing consumes you, you're going to want to jump into the grave with that thing that you lost. You're going to want to jump into the grave with it. And once you start down that road, it's very difficult to get back.
Right. That's almost like Ecclesiastes 3, where Solomon says that, there's a time and place for all things, or season, for all things.
Okay. So now we're at Job 3. This is Job's lament. He's lamenting his his plight that he's going through. So he's having a hard time with this, as we all would. Job 3:1. After this, opened Job his mouth and cursed his day. So he didn't curse Elohim, but he cursed the day. And this is what I'm talking about, wanting to get in the grave. And Job spake and said, verse 3, let the day perish I was born, and the night in which it was said, there is a man child conceived. Verse 4, let that day be darkness. Let not Elohim regard it from above, neither let the light shine above it. Let darkness and the shadow of death stain it. Let a cloud dwell upon it. Let the blackness of the day terrify it. So Job is going on and on. Verse 6, as for that night, let darkness seize upon it. Let it not be joined unto the days of the year. Let it not come into the number of the months. So he's basically saying that day I was born, let's erase it. Erase that day I was born so I don't have to feel like this. Right? Erase the day that I was born so I don't have to feel like I'm feeling right now. Remember that it makes you want to jump in the grave. Lo, let thy night be solitary. Let no joyful voice come therein. Let them curse it that curse the day, who are ready to raise up it, their mourning. Let the stars of the twilight therefore be dark. Let it look for light, but have none. Neither let it see the dawning of the day. Because it shut not up the doors of my mother's womb, nor hid the sorrow from my eyes. Why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? So this is what Job is feeling right now. He's saying, this is so bad. Why didn't I die when I came out the womb and just gave up the ghost right away? Boom.
He's regretting the day he was born.
Yep.
It was so much pain.
Yep. He's saying right now he would have preferred to be born and died right away instead of having to deal with this. Remember what grief does to you. Grief leads you to the grave. It leads you to the grave. And that's why you have to be very strict in your life with grief. You can only grieve something for a time period, and you need to move forward from that time period.
This is kind of off topic, but how come they made that term good grief? There's nothing good about grief.
Yeah, no. I think
Right.
sometimes slang or sometimes those I guess there's like an idiom almost. Sometimes
Yeah.
it's good, bad, bad, good. So
Right. Well, then again, it goes to say that, they made the good things, they made bad things good and good things bad.
right. All right.
Right. Especially in this day and age.
Absolutely. Verse 12.
Yeah.
Why did the knees prevent me, or why the breasts should I suck? So basically, he's saying, listen, you kept me alive. Why'd you keep me alive, Mom? What'd you keep me alive for? For now I have lain still and been quiet. I should have slept. Then had I been at rest. So he's saying that if he would have just died at that point, he would have been at rest. All right. So Job is having a extremely difficult time with what's going on. All right. He's having an extremely difficult time. And he has regretted this so much that he's saying that, why was I born? Why am I alive right now? I would just prefer to be dead. Right. So as we look at things that happen in our lives, right? And we look at things that we lose, right? Because as we get older, we're going to lose more and more things, right? We're going to use I lost my dad a long time ago. So that grief is, I don't experience grief for him at this point, but I lost my dad in 2000, my dad. So it's been over 20 years since my dad passed. But I lost my sister about 3.5 years ago, right? It was tough. It was tough. But I think in my mind, I kind of, and I was in this walk, which was good because it helped out a lot. I think if I wasn't in this walk, it would have been a lot more difficult for me to deal with that because I look at my mom. My mom is still in the mourning period from losing her daughter. She still feel she still is experiencing that mourning and that grief. And that grief has taken hold. And I try to help her, but that grief is just really like taking hold of her. And it's like that for a parent that loses their kid before them. That could be the thing to take the parent out next. So when you look at it, you look in your personal life, and as we get older, we're going to experience some of these losses. We're going to lose all kinds of things, right? But we have to remember, right? I'm going to remind you of a scripture. All right, let me find it real fast. Okay. I'm going to remind you of Matthew 6:33. Okay. Matthew 6:33. Okay. And it says, but seek ye first the kingdom of Elohim and his righteousness, and all these things shall be added unto you. Take therefore no thought of the morrow, for the morrow shall take thought for the things of itself. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. So when we start to, those other things become so important, and so we're so tied and connected with those things that if we lose them, we can't move on and we can't serve Yah, then we have a problem. All right. We have a
Right.
problem.
It's almost like, what that verse is like, people like worry about their future and all that
We're
stuff.
worried about all
And like,
kinds of things.
huh?
They're worried
Yeah.
about all
They worry
kinds.
about everything, you know what I'm saying? Like, yeah, like, about tomorrow. Oh man, what if I don't make this job? Or what if I get fired tomorrow? Or like, what if like all the stuff that hasn't even happened yet. I used to go through that. Like when I used to go to depression. Like depression, anxiety and stuff that wasn't even there. And I would sit there and get upset, feel nervous and anxious and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
So,
and that can lead to grief.
right. Exactly. Exactly.
Mhm.
So when you look at grief, grief is normally a precursor or the thing that leads you into depression, right? So you have the grief of the thing that you lost, and that grief leads you into depression. Does anybody know anything about depression and how people act when they're depressed? What are some of the things they do or don't do?
They're quiet.
They
They
could be. You don't have to be
yeah.
quiet though. They could be.
Hmm.
They could be
They
quiet.
they how do I put this? Hmm. Usually they're always like sad. Even like you can kind of feel it sometimes. Like you can feel it like how their vibe, how they give off and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they uh, I ain't gonna lie, I've been I know how the feeling is. I just haven't been like that in a while.
Yeah,
All praise the most high.
sometimes you
But
do get quiet and shut down. Sometimes you're
yeah,
in your room and you don't
yeah,
want
yeah,
to
yeah.
interact
You
with
don't
anyone.
want to be. Yeah,
You isolate yourself.
you don't want to text
Sometimes,
nobody and stuff
right?
like that. You don't want to communicate with no one.
Sometimes you can't clean
You
your.
barely want to. Yeah, you barely want to eat.
You're right. Sometimes you don't
You
want to
don't want to
clean
come
your house.
outside. Yeah,
Sometimes you
yeah,
don't. There's a whole lot of stuff tied to that. But the gateway to depression is grief. That's the
Right.
gate.
yeah, yeah.
Right? That's how you get there. Go ahead.
How
Go ahead.
I describe it is like you feel like an empty bag. Like it's like your insides are missing something.
Yeah.
That's how I feel. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? But the whole time you are filled up. You're filled up with them wicked spirits that are making you feel that way.
Right. Right.
All right. Another a couple other things with grief is like it's mood changes. So
Oh yeah.
you will go into like a lot of mood swings. So 1 minute you'll be happy, you'll be okay, not happy. And then the next minute something can trigger you to become extremely sad.
Yeah.
Also, you feel guilty in
Mm-hmm.
some aspects, helpless in some
Mm-hmm.
aspects. Um, you know,
Yeah.
and
Guilty is
depending,
a good
huh?
one. Guilt is a good one. Guilt
Yeah,
is a
because
good
that's
one.
what
Hopeless.
I was saying earlier when I said that, like if you lose someone, a lot of people go into what they could have did as if they could have done more or they could have did something,
Yep.
to
Yes.
Has anybody had the okay, so you lose someone close to you, but before that person died, you didn't have a close relationship with them, and now you lost them. What's the first thing that that person will normally say?
I should have, I should have.
I should have.
Should have been
I should have
there.
did this. I should have done that. I should have went to go see that person. I
And that's
should
guilt.
have. Yep. So that's guilt. That guilt is based on that grief
Agree.
that you're feeling for that loss. So
Right.
grief is that gateway. Grief could lead to depression, guilt, anxiety. All of these things, the gateway through to those things is through that grief. Go ahead, Mick.
Oh
You was gonna say something?
no,
I thought you were gonna say something.
I was. I was just buying my time.
Oh, go ahead, talk.
No,
You're on.
I was gonna say, I remember, and people might not see it that way, but it's very true. Those times when and I was on drugs and I was doing drugs all night long.
Mm-hmm.
And next day, after I ran out of money, I didn't have anything. The
Mm-hmm.
way I felt, and I could tell you, man, it's the same way that I would feel now when I'm really very, very upset about something and I really want to make a change.
Mm.
So yeah, just to bring that up, that it was
No, that's a good one. That's a good example. Actually, that's a
strong,
really good example. Yeah.
extremely strong.
Yeah, the
So
feeling is overwhelming, right? It's
Yeah.
right,
yeah,
that's right. I mean, something that I would never want to have to deal with again.
right,
And even though a lot of things happen to me now, I ain't never got to that place because that
right.
place is close. You're close to. I mean, that's when you take a knife and
That's it. That's what
you
I
put your
yeah.
hands
Yep.
on your three on your veins because somebody tells you that if you really want to do yourself in, just cut your self on your hands, and then you wind up in a hospital, and then the doctor tells you it says it's a cry for help. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you're not dead. Okay.
Right, right. Now you want to jump in that grave. You would just want to pull the dirt over you, right?
Yeah.
You just
Yeah.
want to pull the dirt over you and be done with it because it's too much for you. You can't deal with it anymore, and
But you
that's it. That
out.
that that's what happens.
Yeah. You're crying. You're crying for somebody to help you. It's a
Mhm.
lot of times you see it. You know, when you watch a lot of the homeless people out in the street, you're
Yes,
watching it.
yes,
And they
yes,
get manifested to such a point. These
yes,
people are depressed. That's why the Most High sends them, you know,
yes,
people
yes.
that can deal with them, people
Right.
that can talk with them, somebody that can sit down with them, somebody to try to figure out where that hurt is coming from, and then what you can do to help them with that hurt. And
Who did
sometimes
the?
it's a
Go ahead.
friend.
Yeah, yeah. The Most High, he realized that how these people, homeless, widows, those were the people he sent us to because what did he know? A widow, someone that loses their husband, right?
Has
They're going to
grief.
feel grief, right? And
Mm-hmm.
they're going to feel hopelessness. They're going to feel
Yeah.
despair. They're going to feel depression and all of these things. So somebody needs to stand in the gap for that widow, all right? Because that widow doesn't have, because if that widow was married to somebody for 40 years and he passed, she really don't know what to do at that point because they were one.
Mm-hmm.
They went to the store together. They went to sleep together. They watched TV at night together. They walked in the park together. They all of the ate together every meal, like all of these things that they did together. Now all of a sudden you're
It's,
doing these things by yourself. Man, that's rough.
yeah.
So somebody had to go in and visit these folks. If you remember in Acts, right? The Grecians got mad. Why? Why did they get mad at the Jews? They get mad at the Jews because no one was visiting their widows. So that's when they appointed the deacons, right? And the job of the deacons was to do what? The job of the deacons was to go into the homes to make sure people ate, to make sure all of those things happened. That was the job of the deacons because the apostles were out ministering and they was out and about, so the apostles weren't able to do it, so they had to appoint men, they had to appoint deacons to do this job, because once they formed the assembly, right, somebody had to be in charge of doing those things to maintain the assembly.
Right.
And that's what Stephen was. Stephen was one of the first deacons. And it said about Stephen, first it said to find men. So even the deacons, it said find men that are full of the Spirit to be deacons. So it wasn't just a Joe anybody that could be a deacon. It was men that were full of the Spirit. And you can tell that by how Stephen, before Stephen was stoned and his vision and all of that, that Stephen was full of the
Ruach.
Ruach. He was full of the Ruach.
You can tell that with the ones in the past too. Like Elijah, he sent Elijah to the woman.
Mm-hmm.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same thing. You're not going to send somebody who's 20 years old, he's at the top of his manhood, and he's ready to go and
Right.
or somebody that's you're not going to send that kind of person. You're going to send somebody who's usually they're going to be very much into themselves. They know themselves very well. They're going to be full of the Most High, and they're going to be those people that can shut those kind of things. They can shut their eyes at some things. They don't have to look down at women. And they're not going there to be a husband to their wives, but to be a father to the children. In other words, they're there to take care of them, but not to take advantage of the situation which they're in. Because a lot of these women be looking for men.
Exactly. And that's a trap right there, right? So the trap
Right.
would be you go into that home and all of a sudden you start messing around instead of doing what you were assigned to do. So you would have to be full of the Spirit, because if you're not, it's easy to go in there and she has this sob story and you feel bad for her. Next thing you know, it's a wrap.
That's right.
So you're absolutely right. You would have to be able to do that, full of the Spirit, and know what you're there to do.
It's the same thing with ministry. I don't know how they separated with deacons, because I don't even know what a deacon is, but it's the same thing with ministry. You would catch these women like that. I ain't handsome, so I don't get very many, but I have got some.
That's yo, man, that's funny.
And then when one have done this, I quickly, she caught it, because I would never give her the opportunity. Every time she would do it, I would say, "Oh well, somebody will come in your life one day." I would hit her off and just.
But you would try to say like, yeah.
Hurting her,
take the focus off of you,
leaving her in order to help her, whatever the situation. I was just on the phone with her. I prayed for. I think this was Saturday or Sunday. She had called me because she wanted me to pray for her. So you see, I didn't lose her.
Right. Yeah, no, that's important, because like you said, it's easy to fall into that. If you're not focused, then it's easy to fall into that, and it will that will be another, like a stumbling block for you. Just so we can close the conversation about deacons. I don't want to get too far off, but I just want to show Mikael the script that I was talking about in regards to them choosing the deacons. So it says here, Acts 6:1, and in those days when the number of the disciples were multiplied, there arose a murmuring of the Grecians. Remember, I said that against the Hebrews, because their widows were neglected in the daily ministration, meaning that they weren't receiving food or help or aid or anything. Then the 12 called the multitude of disciples unto them and said, it is not reason that we should leave the word of Elohim and serve tables. So they're saying, like, listen, our job is to be out there. Our job is to be out there. We can't stop what we're doing right now and come back in and serve these people and make sure that they have what they need. Verse 3, wherefore, brethren, look ye out among you 7 men of honest report, full of the Ruach HaKodesh and wisdom, whom we may appoint over this business. But we will give ourselves continually to prayer in the ministry of the word. So they separated it. So they had the people doing different jobs. Remember the body of the Messiah. People doing different things, but it's all for the body.
Right.
And the saying pleased the whole multitude, and they chose Stephen, a man full of faith and of the Ruach HaKodesh, and Philip, and Prochorus, and Nicanor, and Timnon, and Parmenas, and Nicholas, a proselyte of Antioch. So those are the people that they chose. Those were the first 7. Okay. And then here's how they got them in there, whom they set before the apostles. And when they had prayed, they laid their hands on them. And the word of Elohim increased, and the number of disciples multiplied in Jerusalem greatly, and a great company of priests were obedient to the faith. So even the priests, you don't hear that often, even the priests were starting to be obedient. All right. You don't hear that. You hear the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they were doing this, they were doing that, they were doing this. The Pharisees and the Sadducees were doing this and that. But this is letting you know that a number of them started to become obedient to the faith. All right. So that was the deacons that were chosen. Those deacons were chosen because those widows and those people, they experience grief. The widows, the poor, the people that are disabled, all of those people are the people that experience grief. So what has to happen is he appointed people to take care of those people, knowing that those people were going through. All right. So it didn't get to the point where those people were hopeless, because they would never come in. They would never come into the faith if they were hopeless. There had to be something to give them faith in rescuing, or faith in someone looking out, or faith in whatever it was. There had to be someone that would help them, because once you lose that thing that you depended on, it became very difficult to serve the Most High. Okay, so that's that. All right, I want to go back to, where was that? 2 Samuel. I'll go back to 2 Samuel because I didn't hit that really. Or 1 Samuel. Okay. Was it? Yeah, 1 Samuel 16. All right. So let's look at what happened with Samuel and Saul. 16:1. And Yahuwah said to Samuel, how long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing that I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thy horn with oil and go. I will send. Huh?
Oh no, my sister sneezed.
Oh. I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. So the Most High is basically telling Samuel, that's enough, brother. That's enough. I'm not with him anymore. That's enough. I need you to fill that horn. And if you look at it spiritually, right? Look at that spiritually, what he said to Samuel. He said, fill thy horn with oil and go. Look at that through a spiritual sense. That's the word right there. That's the word right there. Fill your horn with oil. Remember, your horn is your power, right? The horn was the power. It was a symbol of leadership or rulership. Fill thy horn with oil.
Anoint your power, and go out there and preach the word.
Go out and go. Yeah. So put an end to your mourning or your grief, and fill your horn with oil and go. And that's what he told Samuel. So spiritually, that means, yo, you got to get back on. Like, I know you fell off. You're still mourning. You got to get back on now.
Get back up.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. You know what? That's almost like he told him in a different way, but he did say this to him. What he said to what's his name? What he said to the two the two brothers. Wow.
Which two brothers?
The two brothers in the beginning. What you call the
Cain
sons?
and Abel?
Yeah. Kind of
Oh,
like the way
Yep.
kind of like the way he said to Cain. He told Cain, if you do well, would you not be
Accepted.
yeah. So it's kind of like the same thing in a way, because he knew he was wow, he was grieving, but it was anger. That grief turned
Yes,
into
that grief
anger.
turned to anger, but it's the same thing. Yeah,
That's right.
because he didn't
Turned
accept the sacrifice, so he was still thinking about that thing.
he never stopped.
Exactly. He never let that thing go. He couldn't let it go, that his sacrifice wasn't accepted. And that led to him murdering his brother. That's a good
Absolutely.
example. No, that's a good example.
And that's almost the same way Esau has been murdering Jacob.
Yes.
It's the same thing. Over the centuries, it's still the
Yep.
same thing
Yep.
happened. That the hate that they actually have, well,
Yep.
one of them for the other.
And that hate goes back to the birthright. That birthright caused grief, right? That birthright, giving up that birthright caused grief. And from that time to this time, been trying to reclaim that birthright.
It's basically the whole Bible.
Yes, you're right.
It's
You
the
absolutely
whole fight. It's that whole fight. It's between Esau, it's
Mhm.
Yah, Esau, and well, you know what I mean, going against each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. So verse 2, and Samuel said, how can I go? If Saul hear it, he will kill me. And Yahuwah said, take a heifer with thee and say, I have come to sacrifice to Yahuwah. All right. So a little bit of deception here. And call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show thee what thou shalt do. And thou shalt anoint unto me him who I name unto thee. And Samuel did that which Yahuwah spake, and came to Bethlehem. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming, and said, comest thou peacefully? So this even shows you, like, when Samuel came to town, like, people was a little nervous of Samuel. But remember, Samuel was nervous of Saul, because Saul was the king, right? So even though Samuel was a great man, he didn't want to come against Saul because he was afraid to be killed. So he was mourning this whole time, like, I could be killed if I do this thing that the Most High is telling me. And that was, part of the source of his mourning, because he was genuinely afraid of Saul, because he knew that Saul could put him to death just like that. So he was genuinely a little bit afraid. So he, instead of saying, embracing, all right, there's a new king, you're not with him anymore, you're going to anoint a new king. Samuel was kind of going back and forth, because he didn't want to die. He didn't want Saul to come, but he knew that the Most High wasn't with Saul anymore. So the Most High had to give him a little kick in the butt and say, come on, fill your horn with oil and let's go. And do what I tell you to do, and you'll live. Okay. Was there anything else that I wanted to get out of this one? Okay, now this is it just goes into David being anointed. And okay, so verse 14. But the spirit of Yahuwah departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from Yahuwah troubled him. So now this is important, because, as you know, what does Saul end up doing? What does he end up doing? Who remembers what does Saul end up doing as a result of losing the spirit? What does he end up doing?
Oh, he killed all the
Oh,
priests.
he goes to a medium.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep. He
He goes to
seeks the yep.
that witch to try to seek
Right.
the spirit of Saul.
The Samuel, right? He
Of
tries to
Samuel.
Samuel.
yeah,
My
he
bad.
tries to
Is that the Witch of Endor?
yeah.
Yeah, the witch, the medium of Endor. Witch
Saul was
medium, same thing.
Saul was mourning the loss of the Ruach. He was grieving the loss of the Ruach. So the only way he knew how to get that Ruach back was by going through who?
A medium.
Or
Oh, through Samuel.
through
I'm sorry.
Samuel, yeah.
Yeah, to go to
He
Samuel.
went
Samuel.
he went so far, grief drove him so far that he was willing to try to bring Samuel back up in order to figure out what to do next. Remember what I told you about grief. Grief will lead you to do things, not
That you
short of
should do.
dying. You'll do some things to rectify, to get rid of that grief. You'll do some things that you normally wouldn't do. Right? Remember, Kai had mentioned changes in your behavior.
Right.
You'll have a person that's been solid your whole life, and they start to go through grief, and they are a totally different person.
Uh-huh.
You'd be like, man, what happened to so and so? So and so used to be da, 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 da. But now they're just like they lying, they doing this, yep, because they're trying to mask and get rid of that grief that they're feeling. Same thing
Right.
with Saul. Saul was trying to get rid of that grief. The only way he knew how to get rid of it was the Ruach, but the only way he could get that he thought that he could get back there was going back through Samuel.
Right.
And the way to get to Samuel was through
You
a
had to bring
medium.
him up. You had to bring him up because he was gone. So the only way was I had to bring him up. I had to hear from this man. I have to hear from the prophet. And he went that far. That's deep.
Yeah, because it
That's
made him
deep.
relentless.
Exactly. He wasn't going to stop until he was able to get what he wanted. But that didn't work though. And the problem was he did all of that, but that didn't take away the curse that was upon him. That didn't take it away. That made things 1,000 times worse.
Right.
And that's what happens. Our grief will lead us to do some things that we think that it's going to get rid of it, but it ends up being worse than where we started.
All right.
So then we find ourselves, in lots of trouble trying to satisfy that grief. Right. So there's only one more thing I want to show you, and then I'm done. Hold on, give me 1 second. I just need to find that last scripture.
Could I drop a script in here?
Yeah, go ahead.
As dealing with all of the different symptoms and all of the different things that we had already covered.
Mm-hmm.
I had mentioned this scripture before, but I'm gonna give the script, give the chapter and verse.
Mm-hmm.
It's Matthew 12, and that's verse 44.
12:44.
Yeah, you could use 44 and 45.
Okay.
But 45 is more,
Go ahead.
Okay. It says, then he said, I will return to my house from which I came out. And when he is come, he find it empty, swept, and garnished. Then he goeth and taketh with himself 7 other spirits more wicked than himself, and they enter in and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. So even shall it be also unto this wicked generation. So even in there, it has that key that, grief opens up a door, right?
Mm-hmm.
And with that grief that opens up a door, it opens up a door to to a numerous amount of spirits or a numerous amount of effects in your life, right? That are opening gateways that bring in things that are worse than what you anticipated on this thing being before, you know, which would lead you right to the grave, and just like you said it, you know, in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with this one, with that one, right? That's good. Me, you, Nachemia, and Yo, and that's great. And I hear everything that you're saying, brother. But ministers of God's word, will we say something like that to them to help them?
No, I would utilize a portion of that scripture. Yes, I would.
No, I depends on who's the people, what's they understanding,
What they understand.
what
Yeah.
they
Right.
understand.
Yeah. Because
But
they could. Yeah. 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 They could. Yeah.
I,
Yeah.
the thing is, what? Even though I know that, you know, what I'm trying to get is I'm trying to fight grief, where I won't allow it. That I won't use grief to hurt my brothers, or
Right.
use
Yeah. Yeah.
as a stumbling block to
Yep.
lead away from ministering unto God's people.
Yes. Yep.
So I'm
Right.
looking at
Yep.
this lesson here as a way, and all of us should be looking at it the same way, as a way of helping ourselves where we can help others.
That's right. That's right. So it doesn't stop you in mid motion because now you're stuck. Just like he told Samuel,
Right.
fill your horn with oil and go.
Almost the same way I keep on saying, oh, you know what? I ain't going to stop. I'm just going to keep on doing what I do.
That's
But
yeah.
this thing shut me down.
Yep. Yep.
So I don't want it shutting me down no more.
Right. Right. Right.
I'm not going to let it stop that fire from burning up under my butt no more.
That's right. That's right. Because it doesn't have power over you. It only has power that you give over you. It doesn't have power over you. But when you lend your thoughts and your emotions to it, remember it's a consumer. It consumes you.
Right.
So that's why you have to put a limit to it. It's okay to mourn and it's okay to feel grief, but you have
to get out of it.
You have to
You
limit
got
it.
to move on.
That's right. That's why two situations. Job mourned for 7 days with his friends, and then they mourned the death of Jacob 70 days. It's showing you that they had to put an end to it and bury it. You bury the grief and you move. I didn't get what I wanted. I didn't get the job I wanted. I'm going to bury that thing and I'm going to move on to the next.
Right.
I might feel bad about 2 days. Then I need to get on. And some things are going to be longer depending on what it is and how deep it was. Like when I lost my sister, yeah, I mourned. I did mourn. But I'm not mourning now. And I'm not in grief now.
There's a time to be sad. There's a time to be angry.
Right.
I believe that's a verse, isn't it?
We can look at it like this,
Yeah,
right?
that's Ecclesiastes 3.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Look at it like this too. Abraham loved Sarah.
Yes.
When the Most High came to the tent of Sarah and Abraham, he said, I'll come in this time of the year next year and you will have a son. And she laughed. She said, how? When my Lord is the age he is, and me in the way of a woman anymore. Right? So
Yeah.
both were saying that they really probably wasn't doing those kind of things anymore, but yet they bear the son. We know they did because they bared Isaac. But after Sarah died, Abraham had more children.
Yep.
So he didn't sit back and he grieved at that. I'm not saying grieved or what, but I'm just saying he moved on.
He did. He grieved for her, but he moved on.
Every time
He
that
kept going.
he went and bought the cave to bury her and all that old kind of stuff.
Yep.
Right? But there was a time he moved on.
Yeah.
Right.
You going to that time for all and
Nope.
season for things?
Nope.
Okay.
I am going to Ecclesiastes 1 now.
Okay.
If I can spell it right. There it is. Okay. Or where's the spell? All right. Now we're going to talk about the wisest man ever to live and what happened to him. Okay. Let's start at 6. Let me see if I want to start at 16. Let's start at 16. Yeah, let's start at 16. Ecclesiastes 1:16. I commune with my own heart, saying, Lo, I am come to great estate and have gotten more wisdom than all they that have been before me in Jerusalem. Yea, my heart had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. So that's Solomon, right? Verse 17. And I gave my heart to know wisdom
Mm-hmm.
and to know madness and folly. I perceive that this is also vexation of spirit. For in much wisdom is much grief, and he that increaseth knowledge increaseth sorrow. So, what Solomon's trying to tell us here is the more you know, the more wisdom that you have, it increases your grief. Why? Because you know the end of things.
Yeah.
You know the end of things. When you know the end of things, that increases your grief because you see people that are perishing and dying and being destroyed right before you.
You know their end.
So now that wisdom that he had, that wisdom that he desired, produced grief in him. What did Solomon do to make himself feel better?
Worldly things.
He collected many what?
Why?
Wives and concubines.
Mm.
His wisdom led to grief. That grief was a doorway. He had to satisfy himself in some way because of the grief that he felt. And he multiplied wives unto himself. And then that grief led to him multiplying wives. And once he multiplied wives, he ended up in idolatry because those wives led him astray. Because that grief he felt caused him to want to please those women because he felt
Right.
that grief. So now, in order to make himself feel better, he had to please those women. And how do you please those women? You had to worship how they worship. So he built altars and did things. And once he satisfied that grief, he had to do it by not only multiplying wives, but worshiping the way they worshiped. And then that led him into adultery, or not adultery, idolatry.
Right.
You know, I seen that today, right? With a Christian guy, and I had this debate with other people too about Christian, right? And we could take it almost the same way, like when the Most High talks about the name, right? He says
Mhm.
he would make his name great. He didn't say he was going to make Jesus' name great, but we know that he would wink at the name for those who don't know.
Exactly.
You know that changes. It's the same way when you explain to somebody about Sunday, or you explain to somebody about the Passover and all that stuff, but they still choose to go on
Mhm.
and buy the Christmas tree.
Mhm.
But was to go upstairs and buy Christmas gifts with them,
Yeah.
you're in idolatry
Yes. Yes.
because you know better.
Yes.
So,
Yes.
yeah.
You know, yeah, exactly. So because you have the knowledge of sin, right? And you
Mm-hmm.
don't turn from that sin, that becomes an issue. You can't,
Oh
you know.
no, you turned from the sin, but then you went back.
Well, that's even worse because that's
And
I can't remember the script, but the script talks about a man that starts out in the truth, but then goes back. Oh man, what script is that?
Even
It's
on
a
Bach.
if it fits too. That fits
Oh,
exactly.
that's Romans. I think Romans 1.
Romans 1.
I think that's Romans 1. Hold on. Uh yeah, Romans 1:21.
Romans 1:21. No.
Not this one.
There's another one. I know this. This is a good one too, because that when they knew God, they glorified him not as Elohim, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish hearts were
I know what.
dark.
So this one,
I'm talking about a
this one,
man that starts out in
like,
the truth and then he turns from that truth and
yeah,
dies.
Right.
this
But
goes back on his own vomit.
Yeah, it's something like yeah.
Yeah, I know the one you're talking about. I'm not exactly sure how it's, but I know a man who returns back onto his own vomit, something like that. Who knew
A
the truth,
dog that goes back to his own vomit.
something like that.
Yeah, like you said, like they know the truth, but they still go back to the world. They
Yeah,
go
that
back to their
person.
old ways.
Okay, I think it's Ezekiel 18. I think it's Ezekiel 18. I think this is it here. I think it's Ezekiel 18:24. So let's take a look at this one here. I think this is it. Okay, yeah, this is it. All right. So, but when the righteous turn away from his righteousness and committeth iniquity, and doth according to all the abominations that the wicked man doeth, shall he live? All his righteousness that he hath done shall not be mentioned. In his trespass that he hath trespassed, and in his sin that he has sinned, in them shall he die.
See,
So
that's why.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, that's why I was saying we got to be careful with Christian on that. I don't think that we should be in front of those crosses now. You know, so in other words, we got to be very careful.
Yep.
You know,
So if Mikael was preaching about, to get rid of the crosses, and then he come up one day and got this big cross around his neck,
mhm,
that's what this is talking about.
that's right.
Right.
All the righteousness that you did prior wouldn't matter.
Mhm,
Only the trespass would matter, and you would die in your trespass.
right. But
That's
you
deep,
also get
brother.
absolutely. You also get that from people. When you
Yeah.
get these people that will come up to you and they would say, "Oh, well, if you say Jesus, is that hurting anything to say Jesus? If I know his name is Yahushua, but if I kept saying Jesus, is he not going to?" And I said, "Well, now you know better."
Yeah.
And he said, "Everyone will come and worship him, and everyone will come and bow down. Everyone will know his name." I'm not exactly sure where the script is, but you could also say something that's a little bit more harder. But you could say, if his name wasn't so important, why they change it to Lord?
Right.
Why they change it at all?
indeed.
Yeah, I don't even feel comfortable like saying Jesus anymore. I automatically just say Yahusha.
Yeah. It's hard to put. I know sometimes you have to, because when you're ministering to folks,
Yeah, that's what
Some
I
people
mean.
don't
Like
know.
sometimes
that's
you got to
But
start somewhere to get them to bring them
yeah.
somewhere.
you got to
But it,
explain to what the
yeah,
name is.
exactly. As
That's
long
the
as you're
only that's
bringing
the
them
only time
right,
I'll
as you're
tell them.
bringing them to the truth. You know what I mean? You're saying, okay, you know him as Jesus, so we'll call him Jesus, but let me explain what his real name is, and this is how his real name, this is how it came about. And
Right.
so sometimes you do have to start in a place. Sometimes you have to
Uh-huh.
say God, because if you start with Yahuwah, they don't know what you're talking about all the time. So sometimes you have to start in a place, but you're moving from that place. You're giving them, and this is what Paul talked about, being all things to all men.
Right.
You're starting at a place so they understand because if they don't understand, they're not going to be able to continue in the conversation. So you got to get understanding first, and then you bring them forward from understanding. And we all have to do that, because depending on who we're talking to, if that's all they know is the name Jesus, then you have to really break down where Yahusha comes from and what it means in the Hebrew and all of that. But it may take a few minutes to get there.
Uh-huh.
You know?
Right.
And
Hey,
yeah.
oh,
Go ahead.
and the other script, when you get a chance, pull up 2 Peter 2:21.
All right.
'21 and 22.
Okay. For it had been better for them. Oh, wait, hold on. For if after they have escaped pollutions, yeah, this is good right here. Start at
This
20.
is the one you want? Yeah, 20 to 20.
Well, this is another one. I mean, I wanted the Ezekiel one, but this
Okay.
is almost the same though. For if after they have escaped the pollutions of the world through the knowledge of Yahuwah and Savior and Messiah Yahusha HaMashiach, they are again entangled therein and overcome. The latter end is worse with them than the beginning. For it had been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than after they have known it to turn from the holy commandment delivered unto them. But it has happened unto them according to a true proverb. This is what Yosh was talking about. The dog is turned to his own vomit again, and the sow that was washed to her wallowing in the mire. And everybody knows what a sow is. A sow's a pig.
Yep.
Pig turns back to its own, turns back to the mud. The pig's
Or
going
its
to always go back to
defecation.
the mud, and the dog turns back to its vomit. Yeah,
Right.
that's good. That's it too. That's it too. Yep, that's it too. So, I think, kind of getting back to what we were talking about as far as grief. I think that the key to overcoming grief is not to let it consume you, putting a limit on that grief and filling your horn with oil and going.
Right.
That's the key. That's the key to get you through grief. Because once you open yourself to it, it consumes you. And whatever that loss is, you desire to be in the grave or wherever that loss takes you. And then remember, it's a gateway. Grief is a gateway for other things to come in and to inhabit you. So once that doorway of grief is open, depression, anger, anxiety,
Disappointment.
guilt,
Sorrow.
disappointment, despair,
Sorrow. Yeah.
sorrow, all of those things enter in through that same doorway. So that's why it's important to have a limit to your grief. And if we do that, we say, hey, today, no matter what, I'm getting out of this bed and I'm going to do what I got to do no matter what. Then tomorrow will be a little bit easier. The next day will be a little bit easier. And the next day will be a little bit easier until you have overcome that thing.
Right.
That's it. That's all I got.
Yeah.
Hallelujah.
Right on time.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. That is. Oh, how do I stop sharing the screen? Oh, stop presenting. All right. You can stop recording, I guess.
I already stopped.
Oh, did you? Oh, it still says record up there.